Hi everyone, I'm here with Iris van Herpen, widely considered one of the most exciting and creative designers working today, in not only in haute couture, but in all of fashion. Wildly fascinating work that I've been following for a long time. And I'm very happy, Iris, that you are here with us today.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Yeah, I also want to add that every time there's a lot of interest in your work from all the conversation I've had and everything I see, but especially so from students. So I think it's like doubly great that you're here talking to students. But I wanted to start to see how you're doing and how you've been coping with this year in 2020 with everything that's going on.
Yeah,
Has that affected your work?
of course it has. I think it has affected everyone to the core. The beginning was just really disorientating because, of course, we didn't know how to do the craftsmanship within the atelier. We had to work from home, which is a really big challenge when things are so physical. The work is really physical, and we had to be really creative there. Now at least we are able to work partly in the atelier, which is a big help to work on the collection. But still part of the team works from home, so a lot of Zooming is now part of the daily reality. And I collaborate a lot with people from different disciplines, and normally in the process it's really important to visit each other, meet in real life, share samples. It's a quite intuitive process to work on material experiments and to have that physical interaction. Maybe it's more important even to me because I come from dance. It's that human interaction that is a big part of my work, and obviously that is just different this year. So again, even the collaborations with institutes or artists or architects, everything is done online, which has its pros and cons, I would say. I mean, saving a lot of time on traveling,
Yeah.
but on the other hand, there's a certain magic between people that is lost. Yeah, we'll see when that is possible again.
Yeah. So I feel like a lot. I was thinking about it the other day. I was wondering, like, oh, how is Iris these days? How is she working? But I thought that you do draw so much inspiration that you find online and in books, and now you can do all this research kind of without leaving your home.
Inspiration is never the issue. I think inspiration comes from so many sides. It can be a conversation with someone. It can be a walk in the city. It can be a book, indeed. It can be a piece of dance that you're seeing. So that is really, I don't think that has changed. It's actually interesting that there was more time for doing research, which is really nice. Sometimes it's going from one show into the other, and then it's really hard to really sit down and to go in depth into a subject that I'm fascinated by. So that was actually a really nice part of the lockdown this year, that I had a lot of time for reading and doing research. And also the sustainability is a big part of my work, so doing experiments on the development on the materials. We actually were able to start up quite a few new collaborations because there was less time pressure on the collection. So I think there are some really positive things that are coming out of this confinement, I would say.
Right. That's cool. In a way, I wonder that I feel that a creative mind actually should have some limits and limitations, not limits, limitations and parameters. Otherwise, you'll be all over the place.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's part of my daily life because even the limitations on materials are defining all of my work, I would say. So I think in the end, creativity always finds new ways. I think that's the essence of creativity. So I think this year actually has been a very good learning curve to find different rhythms within the creative process of a collection. And I really feel it has actually shaped me in a positive way.
Yeah. But in the end, I feel still, clothes are three-dimensional and tactile. And at the end of the day, we'll have to have the physical experience.
Yeah, and also share together. I mean, expressing ourselves is really a tool, an instrument to explore who we are, but also I think it's collaborative moment that you want to share with someone or with more people. And I think the part where everyone is sort of forced to stay at home, I think is one of the hardest part, I think, for fashion, because it takes away that moment of
I actually just realized I never asked you this before, because your work is so visually striking and so unlike anything else that's out there. But I would say probably 99% of the people have only seen it on a computer screen or in the book. But how important is for you, the physicality of the clothes?
Well, that is the ultimate experience of the work. It's tactile, it's three-dimensional, it's in constant transformation when it's in dialogue with the body. And because I come from dance, it's such an important part to experience it on a physical body and the identity of the woman that is wearing it. And then it really comes to life. I think in a book, it has its beauty, and in a museum even, it has its beauty. Even online, but it's two-dimensional and often in a small scale. So ultimately, I think the only way to really feel what the work is about, I think you need to see it in art.
Yeah. I was thinking about it because I just, museums have reopened in New York. So I've been to the Met, and there are two of your dresses now at the Met on display at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in two different exhibitions.
Yeah, nice.
So I sent you a picture of the skeleton dress.
Yeah, I actually didn't know until you were sending me.
Yeah. So I saw that and I thought, it's great, but it's in a glass cube. And I thought, well, still people are missing something, because unless you see it on the body and in motion, you don't get the whole picture.
Exactly. I mean, a sculpture is designed to be static and to carry the message by just being there. But I think a garment is different. It really is designed to speak and to interact with us. And that is definitely something that you cannot show in a museum. But at the same time, the amount of or the way people can come close to the details, I think, is very rare, because even when you would see someone wearing the garment, it's sort of rude to go up close and to I don't know, to dive into it, to see all the details. So that is a very special experience in a museum, that at least it's there for you to look at and to come close and to be rude, so to say. Yeah,
no, I agree. And another aspect of your clothes, I think, is motion, right? I feel like, especially in your latest collections, the clothes just flow.
Exactly.
And motion is paramount. And even, of course, we have videos now, so that gives us a better view into your work. But you come, like you said, from dance. You were doing ballet right, during your teenage years.
Classical ballet, yeah.
And so, and now you do costumes for different ballet troupes. I just saw the video for the Dutch National Ballet. That was incredible.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So
it's nice to still work together with dancers and choreographers, because it's just incredible the amount of control dancers have between both their body and their mind, but also their transformative control of their body. It just keeps on fascinating me, and it's really a big source of inspiration to the way I look at materials and the way we can really transcend our energy to, I mean, I don't think our impact to one another stops where our body stops, and I think garments are sort of symbolic to that freedom of form and emotion that we are sharing together. And I really see fashion as a transformative tool, and I think dance really symbolizes the power that we have within ourselves.
Yeah. Have you ever found fashion a limiting medium for what you want to express?
Yes and no. I think for a lot of people, fashion can somewhat be shallow, or like they really perceive it as a product. And I've always seen fashion really as a language, as a form of art that really can say things about who we are, where we want to go to, where we come from, our culture, our values, our morals. It can say so much about ourselves, and it's really a way I can talk to you without knowing you or without even directly interacting with you. And I think it's just a really beautiful tool to express who we are. And I understand not everybody gets that, and not everybody sees the layering within fashion. So it's definitely something that I've been focusing on for quite a few years, is how to express what fashion means to me, and hopefully to inspire people to look at fashion in a different way, and to see the symbolism within fashion, but also the power of language within fashion.
Yeah. Well, I always say that actually fashion is not an easy medium for expression, because in a way the toolbox is quite limited, as opposed to, say, poetry or art, right, or visual art, and in a way it's quite a difficult task to express something when you are working with basically fabric and scissors.
Yeah, well, I think that's where an interesting topic comes up, and I think that's why I'm collaborating with other disciplines, because I think fashion needs to break outside of its own bubble to connect to the multiverse that we're living in. I think fashion is in direct dialogue with architecture, art, science, philosophy, even poetry. As long as we open our eyes to see the relationships between these disciplines, and also to embed an open process, like a creative process within designing the garments. I think, if you don't collaborate with other disciplines, it's easy to get stuck into the fabric and the scissor. Right. But there's so much more to do, and there are so many more materials to explore, and there's a whole future waiting for us. I really relate to fashion as how we know our oceans. We've only explored 5% of them, and I think that's the way I see fashion. We know so little, as there is really a lot more possible than the fabric we know today.
Yeah, is that where the importance of doing a show for you comes in, because it allows you to go beyond just fabric and scissors and really show the Iris van Herpen world?
Yeah, I see the shows as time capsules of where I could push well, both concept but also the techniques within the atelier and the materiality of the materials that we are developing. It's really a time capsule to show where fashion can be and what has been possible through collaboration and experimentation, and it's ultimately to really show people a different side of fashion, a different perspective towards fashion. So I think that's really the goal behind the shows. Yeah.
It's so. I think we're one of the many things where you're trailblazing, I think, is exactly the collaboration with scientists and architects, as opposed to like the usual routes for fashion designers. Like, okay, I'm gonna go to an artist, like, take some pattern from them, put it on the clothes, and announce to the world through a press release, here's a collaboration. Yeah. And you go completely different route. Like, I don't know. I don't think I can think of any other fashion designers who goes to scientists and architects and says, let's do something together.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's really a collaboration on a mental level as well. Like really to take inspiration from the philosophy from someone, the way of working, the process, the experiments. It's really going deep down, and I can imagine for many people that would be too full on. I mean, it's quite a process, and you really have to stand naked as an artist, because you are really ultimately, any creative process is quite personal, and it's fragile, and it's sensitive, and it's layered. So collaborating on that level is really a challenge, and I must say I've really I really became better at it through the years. In the beginning, it was much more indeed practical, trying to merge two disciplines on the level of materiality or technicality. But throughout the years, I learned that the big value of collaboration is really on a mental level, on the level of knowledge, and on sharing intellect. And it's a more complicated journey, but I think the end result is so much more precious than just merging a print onto a pattern. Yeah.
I like what you said, that you have to stand naked in the process of creation, because in a way you are entrusting yourself into the hands of other people, and also people who might be speaking a very different language from you. Exactly. Do you ever feel like you're in the room and you're like, okay, I'm out of my depth here, or we're
I'm
speaking
outside of my comfort zone for sure. No, I mean, example like CERN, with like certain scientists. I mean, they live on another planet, and they can talk so beautifully on the world that they see, and that is limited to me, because obviously I don't have all the knowledge that they have. But at the same time, even if I get fragments, if I get pictures of the film that they are trying to show me, it's inspiring enough to bring my understanding of my own bubble, my own discipline, the way I make garments. It's still influencing it. So even if it's scary, even if it's completely out of my comfort zone, it's bringing me forward, and that's why I keep on putting myself there naked.
Yeah, but they also have to trust in you, right? They also have to trust in.
And that's the amazing part that I would not have imagined before. Diving into it now and then, I would not imagine that there are scientists that are interested enough in fashion to start that dialogue with me. You will be surprised, and there is really a lot of people out there that to also see that value of sharing knowledge, because we quickly spoke about it earlier on the sustainability side of fashion. Obviously we have a long way to go with everyone together, and fashion is not going to be able to move quick enough, I think, if it doesn't start up to collaborate more with other disciplines, including science, to bring the materiality and the technicality much further. And that's why these conversations are so important.
Yeah, I guess at the end of the day, like, all materials are born in physics, right? So,
exactly.
And chemistry, and you'll have to talk to them in order to get most sustainable materials possible. So let's talk about sustainability a bit more, because this is definitely like a very hot topic, and since you brought it up, I'll what have been your thoughts as of late on sustainability and how you are approaching it in your work?
Well, it's interesting because we spoke about collaboration, and I think the ultimate goal of where we need to go to is to start a true collaboration with nature in every discipline on this planet. We're gonna have to look at our processes in a biomimic sense, and to instead of using nature,
excuse me.
Bless you. No, instead of using nature, to really start collaborating with nature. And of course, that's a long way to go, but every step is important. And that's one important reason that we are collaborating with different disciplines to improve the materiality and the technicality behind the work, and to ultimately, that is the goal for at least my atelier, and hopefully for fashion as a whole, to really make it sustainable from the very beginning to the very end in each step of the process. And I think it's very possible. So I'm very optimistic on that side. At the same time, I do realize that for couture, obviously, it's much more controllable, because there's different budgets behind.
You're in the most sustainable part of fashion already.
That's true. So already the process, the whole foundation of couture is sustainable, because you're not creating any garment that is not, you're basically creating on demand, which is already a philosophy, I think, that we need to go to in general. I think the whole pre-production system that we are used to today, I think can change through technology as well. I realize how long this road is going to be, but I think as a couture designer, at least, we can show different materiality and different techniques to hopefully inspire the system as well.
I want to go back to something you just said. You said, like, sometimes you talk to these scientists and they live on another planet, and I remember but also they live on this planet. And I've learned every time I write about your work, I'm always tempted. The word that comes to my mind is otherworldly, like you're close from another world. And then I have to stop myself and say, Iris specifically said many times that her work is not otherworldly, that it's very much of this world. So I have to erase that word and sit there for half an hour and think, like, well, you have to describe it in another way. So I wanted to talk about that a little bit, is that, on the one hand, you push the possibility of fashion as to its outer edge.
I push the perception of the world we are in right now, I guess, because indeed you're talking about otherworldly, but everything we create is here and now. nothing is impossible and nothing lives in the future, even though you might place it in the future. It's possible here now, and I think that's the message behind it. There is so much more possible than we imagine sometimes. And interestingly enough, we also don't live in one world. We all have created our own bubbles within this, within this planet, and we all have our own reality of how we perceive the world. And I think that's where art, I think, takes an important play, is to really show different perspectives to that same world we're living on. And I think it's important to understand that there is not one or such thing as one reality. There's so many cultures, so many backgrounds, so many lives that are all like creating a multiverse of realities. And I think it's unhealthy to think of reality as something too concrete or too stable. And I think that's where art can really show us the multiverse that is actually happening around us. And I think that's maybe also where my work comes in, is that it really shows perhaps a world that not everyone knows, but that is really part of this world as well. And show that there is a lot more possible than some people can see in front of their eyes. Yeah.
And I think in a roundabout way, I think you get that, we get that validation of your work. Actually, I just thought about it when we see it on celebrities, because a lot of your work shows up on the red carpet, but on some level, it's where we sort of display what's possible, right? Because it's a very special thing. And I've never really thought it that way, because I always like, the moment I hear the words red carpet, I want to run as far as possible. But it's also, I think we have to recognize that, that's what it's for sometimes.
Yeah, and it's interesting how these bubbles can overlay each other, because a certain actress on a red carpet has a whole backstory for a certain person relating to a movie or a different storyline, and then in combination with indeed the otherworldliness of my work, it can really create another universe on its own. And it really, I think, makes people see and dream in a different way and perceive reality maybe a tiny little different than before. And I think that's the power that fashion and even the film industry can have, because you can really transcend the imagination of someone.
Mm. Well, it's exactly that. To me, it's about transcending. They are transcendental moments, because they are showing like this is possible, exactly. and it's sort of,
and it's real. It's a real moment that is shared by a lot of people at the same time, and I think that's a beautiful way of celebrating. Celebrating art, I would say.
Yeah, I think, because also think a lot of people are so hung up on the utility of fashion, they sometimes forget that, before we get to the utility, we also have to consider, how do we push the realm of possibility?
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Cool.
Yeah.
I want to backtrack a bit, because we are talking to students, and I know we've spoken about it, but I'm sure they'll be very curious about how you started and what was going through your mind, and how you developed your aesthetic and your work methods and the whole Iris van Herpen universe.
Yeah. Now, the start was very intuitive and primitive and simple in a way. I didn't plan ahead for many years. I started my label in 2007, and it was just me. And along the way, of course, I was able to expand the atelier, but in the beginning it was really me doing the design, the handwork, even the preparation of the first show I was doing in Amsterdam. It was very simple and not really a company yet, but I really took the time to let it grow organically, and I'm really happy for that because it gave me a lot of freedom in the long run. So there wasn't big investment behind it or a business plan, which has its pros and cons, I would say. On one hand, I think when I look back, it was pretty naive. But at the same time, to give it time and to make it grow organically gave me a room to develop as an artist and to know more and more my ways of working. And I think that's how I was able to find the preciousness within collaboration with other disciplines, but also the preciousness of experimentation and the layering between craftsmanship and technology. All the elements I think that are essential to my work today have really been discovered because I could do it within my own pace. And I think I'm really grateful that it all happened the way it happened.
Yeah.
That I had not too many people saying what I should do or the way I should do it. Because as a designer, if you start your own label, it will come in many different forms. All the time, people that know how to do it, but just always remember there is not a single road to Rome, and there's a lot of different ways of thinking about fashion or creating fashion. And I think especially at this moment where fashion as a whole is transforming and actually looking for a new system, for a new way of producing, for a new way of designing, for a new philosophy almost behind everything we do. Maybe fashion as a whole is looking for a deeper sense of it all. I think especially now fashion needs the young generation to show a different path, to show a different perspective. And therefore I think it's really important for everyone who thinks of starting his or her own label to really stay true to yourself, to think of the future of fashion and to think of how you would do it differently and find a balance. Listen to people that have done it before you. Take the knowledge and the experience that is in there, but not try to copy it, because I don't think fashion will be what it is as we know it today in 10 or 20 years. So we really are hungry for new perspectives in that sense. Yeah.
I hope so too. I really hope new directions will be discovered. And on some level, I feel like it's harder than it was before to come up with a radically new aesthetic on the one hand, the way you've done. And on the other hand, sort of to go up against quite strong forces of, commercial constraints and marketing culture that makes it harder for younger designers to compete, with a handful of very big brands that are sort of hogging that space. But going back through the history of your work, I feel like, you've never compromised in your aesthetic, in the way you work, in the way you put on shows. And you've remained in Amsterdam which I love. You know, and I think it's great. And now I feel like people are coming to you for collaboration.
No, it's, I think, an interesting part that it's possible nowadays. And I think we thank that to technology in the end, that it is possible to run a label from Amsterdam, because the world has become tiny in that sense. And indeed, people are able to travel, well, not this year so much, but normally, indeed, our clients, they come from all over the world. And I think there's a beauty of not being or having to be boxed by just 2 or 3 cities on this planet. I think the place where you are has a lot of influence on the creative process. And if we would all be at the same place, that I don't think would create the diversity that we need today. So I think it's good that designers can be at different places in the world at the same time.
Yeah, and I think what you just said, diversity of fashion voices in fashion is so important. Otherwise, we will live in a very homogenized world, which on some level I feel, I don't know, do you feel this dichotomy? I feel that on the one hand, we have more information than ever before. On the other hand, I feel it's become harder and harder to actually find it because the surface is so homogenized. It's like same people everywhere. It's
exactly what you're saying. I think it's the overkill of information that it's impossible for us to go through. So then you end up indeed in this sort of pre-selected world.
Yeah, everyone is on the same first 5 pages on Google, on the Google first 5 pages on Google search. Exactly. How do you fight through that?
Our mind is slowly going to be shaped by algorithms.
Yeah.
Like it or not. Yeah.
How do you fight through that barrier?
Good question. I don't even know if I am. I mean,
I feel like you are, because every time like I see a collection and I read the notes, I'm learning something. I'm like, oh, here's the artist I never knew about. Here's an architect I never knew about.
Yeah. I think the diversity of your sources is important. Like I find inspiration directly around me from the city I am, but also the conversations I'm having, like with you and other people, with collaborators that I'm working with for a long time. They will introduce me to people I never knew about beforehand. Of course, I do my research through Google as well, online, or even to a social platform. But I think it's just important that you have a lot of different sources to look at. Books is another realm again than YouTube. So I think it's just really important to take time for different people to look with your eyes very wide open and to try to look at the things you would normally overlook. It does take effort. It doesn't come naturally, like you say. It's easy to live in a pre-selected world, but I think when you take a bit of time, it's very possible to dive to under the surface.
I feel like, well, I think now is the time in our conversation to tell students to go to the library and look at books, because I feel it's become such an overlooked resource. And I don't know how you feel, but for me, the internet has never quite solved the problem of browsing. And I always feel when I'm in the library, it's just very different. You can stumble upon more.
Exactly, and it's a bit more of a natural flow, because really doing research on, for example, Google or online, the biggest frustration for me is the overkill. You never feel satisfied because there's always that one click further. And
Yeah.
I think there's a very different energy when you're in a library, for example, or even in a museum. It's a slower pace, it's a different attention span, and it's not unlimited. And I think that's the beauty behind it. So it's a different way of discovering the things around you, and you take a bit more time to the subjects that you're looking at, and that's why I think it just feels more inspiring to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I also think like museums are overlooked often as a source of inspiration.
Exactly.
And you have some great ones in Amsterdam.
Yeah.
For sure.
No, it's really a different attention span. When I walk into a bookstore or indeed a museum, I know that I'm going to be there for a while, and I don't have other things going on at the same time. And I think that's one of the issues. By doing research online, you're always doing something else on the side, or it's just it's a different attention span.
Yeah. I want to switch gears a little bit and talk a bit about materials that you use, because they're such an important part of your craft. And when I was writing my notes, I put the word fabric down, and then I thought, well, actually, that's probably not a good word to describe the materials that Iris uses. And
well, there's a lot of fabric involved, so you weren't wrong there.
Okay.
That's actually interesting that some people might think that everything is 3D printed.
Yeah, we have to dispel that myth for sure.
That's still a question I get sometimes.
Yeah.
No, not everything is 3D printed. It's only one of the 100 tools that are being used, and a lot of classic fabrics like silks, cottons, or blends are being used in the collections. But it's just more than just the fabrics we know. Yeah.
And I think it's really that marriage of the traditional fabrics and new material, as well as actually very traditional craftsmanship methods with the new methods, is really sort of the crux of your work.
Absolutely. I think the combination of traditional craftsmanship with the tools and technologies that is available today really, to me, creates the ultimate freedom of form. I remember just after the academy, or maybe already on the academy, is that every fabric obviously has its identity and requires a certain way of pattern making, a certain way of draping, a certain movement. And it just felt that I couldn't express the sensitivity or the layering that is within my mind, or the way I perceive fashion. It's just very layered, and I think if fashion needs to express where we are as a human being today, I think that merge between our past and our future is really important, and that's why I feel the materiality and the technicality within the work also needs to reflect that. So it would be expressing the past if we would only use the traditional craftsmanship that has been invented like 100 years ago, but at the same time it would be it would be limiting to only think of fashion within like the newer tools of like laser cutting or 3D printing or even 4D printing, as that doesn't show the journey of identity that we have been developing as a culture or as people. So it really feels like a yin and a yang as a whole, as a true expression, as a true reality of where we stand as people nowadays, to combine all the tools we have.
No, I agree, and I feel that any art form should be a reflection of the world we live in today, and that's one of the success metrics.
Yeah,
of
and
it.
the multiplicity of our reality, I guess.
Exactly. And yeah, we need to dispel that myth that everything is 3D printed, because so many times, there's several times I've been to Atelier, there's just so much traditional handwork going on, really just hand sewing, the sort of film panels onto the fabric and things like that.
Yeah, and also traditional techniques like shibori or even plissé, traditional weaving techniques. It's all in there, but it's being layered with other tools and other techniques that we've explored. And I think that is really what makes it possible to go three-dimensional, but at the same time really to embody the movement and the transformation and the softness that I see. That is the femininity that is being expressed in the work. So,
I feel like I was going to ask you about that. I was looking over the history of your shows again, and I thought the work, older work, is much harder. It's much more. I don't want to say it's much more sculptural, but it was. So actually, the way I would put it, it was always sculptural, but it was sculpture made from hard materials, and it's still sculptural now. But now it's like made from flowing soft materials.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, three-dimensionality and layering. That is something that is really part of my DNA, and that is something that transformation, the metamorphosis, the movement, that are subjects that I've been trying to discover for 13 years now. But the skills obviously have evolved, and the layering of tools and techniques and materials have evolved, and it's like evolution. And I just feel I come closer and closer to how I envision fashion. I don't even think the full picture is there yet, because of course it's still a work in progress. But if I look back at the work in the beginning, the philosophy is there. My DNA is there, but the skills haven't evolved the way they have today. So it's an interesting journey or evolution of craftsmanship, you can call it, to look at the work throughout the years. And also a new tool especially takes time to make it your own, like the 3D printing. When I started working with it, I knew the potential within it, so I really wanted to work with it, but the materiality was only developed for the industries like architecture and design, and the flexible materials weren't available at that time. So I had to come up with solutions like print really fine lines to create somewhat of a flexibility, but often it was very limited. But still, it was worth doing it, because working with the printing at that time gave me the time to develop the printing over time. And now we are so skilled with printing that people cannot see the difference anymore, whether it's handmade or printed. And even in the atelier, we can decide which technique we use. But that takes time. The same with craftsmanship or even the sewing machine. You need years and years to make it your own. I always notice it's the same with the technique as with a material. In the beginning, it shapes you, and after so much time, you're shaping
the
material or the technique. And there's this turning point, and that is one of the most exciting parts of the process, where you can feel it in your whole body. You feel that turning point. Okay, now I'm controlling you instead of the way around. And it always takes it takes many years, and patience is definitely a big part of that journey.
I think that's what's missing, I think, a lot in fashion today, where students are taught a lot of like, the way designer works is you draw some stuff and then you hand it over and someone else makes it.
Yeah, that's a fairy tale that I also learned the hard way. And it was actually after, through my internships, I started to realize how much time goes into a piece, craftsmanship on itself, like how much time it takes. And after the academy, I also learned more and more in finding that patience within myself, and to not think too much of the outcome only, because I think that's very limited as a designer. I think you need to love the process if you really want to develop yourself. So it's a different mindset, and that's definitely not what I realized when I started off as a designer studying fashion design, because you're trained to think as a designer, indeed, to make a sketch and then you're done, but it just doesn't work that way.
Yeah,
you have to get familiar to the paint, so to say, as a painter. So
cool. Well, since your baby needs your attention, I'm gonna ask you last thing, and then I think we can wrap up. I think also a lot of people would be curious just about like your a single day at the Iris van Herpen atelier. How does that go?
Well, the good thing is there is not such thing as a single day.
No typical day.
Unfortunately, sometimes. Now my mind shifts from many different places, because it goes from a collaboration to the atelier. I feel very lucky that I'm always close to the atelier. Like I'm always part of the ever-going process, which is really nice. It's also a disadvantage because I don't hand over that sketch and then the atelier does it. It's really a drape, and then it evolves, and then they start making it, and I might change something again, which makes it a bit more chaotic than some other processes. But it is making it really exciting. So when I am starting on a collection, I have no idea about the outcome. So nor does the atelier. So it's really a journey that we are having together. And every day, therefore, is different. And it's super collaborative. Like, it's really symbiotic whole, so to say. And I think that's very rare. I don't think this atelier is very comparable to any other atelier in that sense. It's a very precious process, and throughout the years I have focused more and more on the process and less on the outcome, because I think that's really the basic of it all, that you have to really appreciate the process more than the outcome. Otherwise, you're going to be disappointed always.
Right. Yeah. I actually love that idea, that letting the process guide you.
Exactly. Yeah.
To the outcome.
Yeah, and the outcome is really obviously for everyone around us, but the process is really for us and for everyone in the atelier. And it's almost like the shows are the celebration of the process that we've gone through.
Right. That's actually a great way to see your work. Yeah, cool. Well, I think it's a wonderful note to finish on.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you, Iris. Thank you for doing this for us. I appreciate it. Take care.
Take care. Ciao.
Bye.
Bye.